Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and D.C. Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. Welcome. I'm delighted today to have David Cuillier here. He is the director of the Freedom of Information Project at the University of Florida. So welcome to the program, David.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, glad to have you, especially on Sunshine Week. So I wanted to talk about what Sunshine Week is and sort of how you came about. But first, tell us about your role at the University of Florida and how the Freedom of Information Project kind of plays into that.
Yeah, well, the Breckner Freedom of Information Project's been around almost 50 years now at the University of Florida. It was created to provide research and education and access to public records. And so it's done a lot of things through the decades, a lot of good research, public programming, getting the word out to the public about their right to know. So I was fortunate to be able to join Breckner last summer. Following a great director, Frank Lamonti, who's well known for his work in student press freedom in particular. Now he's doing great work as a legal counsel at CNN. So I was fortunate to join. I was a professor at University of Arizona for 17 years, doing research and education and access to public records. And it's just a great job. There's just so many things to do. And it's so important because there aren't as many groups out there fighting for the public's right to know. And secrecy is increasing according to our research. So it's really important we get the word out for Sunshine Week, the importance of this for democracy.
Well, and so I wanted to kind of just take a little step back, and we are going to get to Sunshine Week because you've gone from sunshine to sunshine. You're just all about light everywhere. But let's talk about freedom of information and the public's right to know. So in Maryland and certainly in Delaware and DC, there are laws, just like there are laws in every state, about what information can be accessed by. In Delaware, it's residents of Delaware. In Maryland, it's anyone in the public. As in DC, can you tell us a little bit about how those laws kind of interact? You've got a great national perspective, and so when you say freedom of information, what kinds of information are free? Is it really free, and who has access to them?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, of course, yeah, as you say, every state has a public records law, and they all vary in some ways. They share similarities, but every state has its pros and cons. Mm-hmm. There's no perfect state out there, but they do vary by quite a bit. So you have some states that can charge you a lot of money for search time, and that could really rack up and pretty much mean you won't get the records unless you're rich. And that's a problem. There are tons of exemptions that have been passed in the laws that exempt information so you can't get it. And they keep growing every year with every legislative session. And that's a huge problem. And so when people just want to get information to help their lives, whatever it might be, to help buy a house, to background some date online, to do some family history, lots of applications for public records that are beneficial to society. It can be really difficult. And what we're seeing is a continued downward spiral into secrecy in this country, all across the nation, and at the federal level and state and local. So, part of it is we just have to educate everybody on what the law is, including the government and the citizens. I mean, they do that in Mexico. They require in Sinaloa every K-12 and university student to be taught how to acquire public records.
Oh, that's so
Uh,
interesting. I had no idea.
yeah, I know. I mean, and if they could do it in Mexico, can't we do it here? I mean, I'm just saying, it's like we're supposed to be a great country, so why are we falling behind? And we are totally falling behind in this compared to other countries around the world.
And so, why do you think that in the US, we're kind of circling the drain and going towards a more and more secret world? Is it because people don't know what to ask, or do you feel like, custodians, which are the people who hold the records of government bodies, are they becoming more protective?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's several different thoughts on why secrecy is increasing in the United States. One is the natural backflow of information once a law is passed. So we see this around the world. A country passes a freedom of information law, and it's all great and it's super for 5 or 10 years, but then things backslide.
Mm.
Government agencies figure out how to game the system,
It's
and
the nips and
exemptions.
tucks that kills you.
Exactly, exactly. Eviscerated by 1,000 cuts. That's what's happened in the U.S. I mean, our Freedom of Information Law was passed 1966, and so had a long time to kind of backslide. And so that's one issue. The other thing is we don't have champions pushing for records day to day like we used to. Part of that's because, frankly, journalists use these records day to day and pushed hard, and newspapers used to sue the government for records. But they're less likely to do so today because they're hurting for money. And the government folks know that. They
Mhm.
see that they could deny someone information illegally and get away with it. They know people aren't going to sue them. And so that's kind of snowballing and growing. In fact, a study I'm just working on shows the connection. The places in America where we're losing newspapers and journalists have the greatest prevalence of secrecy and violating public records laws. There's a connection. You lose a journalist, you lose government accountability and transparency. So we knew that anecdotally, but
Mhm.
now we have data that shows the link, and that's scary.
Well,
So
I feel
yeah.
like that relates to that Pew study a couple years ago that showed higher incidences of public corruption when their local newspaper, when a municipality's or town's local newspaper went away. So does that kind of build? That sounds like more of the same theme there, sadly.
Absolutely. There's a growing body of research looking at the effects of newspapers disappearing, and it isn't good. We're talking higher taxes because bloated government spending. We're talking about less civic participation in elections and all sorts of different impacts. So it's really disconcerting, and we should be concerned about that. And in addition, frankly, governments just got more professionalized and good at controlling information.
Sure.
So you have all of that coming together, and it's kind of the perfect storm for secrecy. I mean, heck, some of our data we look at 10 years ago, if you requested a public record from the federal government, you get it about half the time.
Hmm.
Now it's down to about 10% of the time.
That is shocking. That's
Can
I
you
knew it was low, but that's low.
Can you believe that? Now, those are requesters through the website Muckrock, a nonprofit,
Hmm.
who tend to be journalists and civic minded people. They're the ones getting denied the most. But that's also the most important information that should be revealed. So
Hmm.
it's shocking when one out of 10 requests gets something.
Right.
And what'll happen when it gets to zero?
Right.
That's the scary thought. If our government is allowed to be secretive, then bad things happen.
100%, especially for government accountability and also tracing the efficacy. So many times in data sets you're seeing real change can occur when you're looking at investigations into, like, departments of housing, or where the money goes, or how the justice system is meting out justice, really. And so if you can't get your hands on some of that raw data, that there is no other way to get that information aside from government sources, that can be a real problem. Um,
Right.
we'll go back to what constitutes a government record in just a sec, but I wanted to shift a little bit because you've talked about the importance of the freedom of information, and how every state's different, and there's a federal FOIL law as well. But Sunshine Week is really a celebration of that. And Sunshine Week, I think, has come under your aegis for the first time. Tell us a little bit about what Sunshine Week is. And for listeners, it's March 10th through the 16th, right? Yep, 10th
That's
through the
correct.
16th. Had to check my calendar. So it's
Hmm.
coming up. We're right in the middle of it. But tell us what Sunshine Week is doing, and how your organization is observing and leading it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sunshine Week started as an idea, ironically, coincidentally, in Florida. It was called Florida Sunshine Sunday, and it was where the newspapers in Florida got together to write editorials and stories and promote this idea for citizens that it's their rights, not just the media's, to get information. And so, in fact, the Breckner Center was involved with that, helping with that from the start. And then folks thought, you know what, this is so important. This should be national. So the Knight Foundation provided a bunch of money to make it go national, and
Mhm.
that's when it became National Sunshine Week. And it was run by the American Society of Newspaper Editors,
Right.
what they were called back then. And they did a great job, a heck of a job, doing amazing things to promote this. And through the years, that was in 2005, was the first Sunshine Week. We're coming up on the 20th anniversary next year. And, over time, like all the problems with the newspaper industry, they too suffered.
Mm,
And they decided they had to fold, to close
mm,
shop. And they'll be closing down in June of this year. So they were looking around, well, is there anybody who could pick up Sunshine Week and their other duties? And we said, well, if we could help, we'll be happy to. And so that's how we ended up picking it up and carrying it on. And we hope we can do as good a work as they did, and maybe even make it even bigger down the road if we can get enough folks to rally behind the FOIA. So that's kind of how it came about. Almost 20 years now. We have a great website, sunshineweek.org,
mhm.
that has lots of events listed, 2 dozen events around the country that you can attend during the week, all through the week, and free, a lot of them online, as well as content that you can tap into. You can put on your website and your publications, editorial cartoons, op-ed columns, a a comic showing you how to submit a FOIA request.
Mhm.
We have FOIA puzzles and games, crosswords, word search,
Oh,
bingo,
fun.
FOIA bingo. So there's just a lot of options there for, and it's a group effort. It's not just Breckner. Lots of organizations involved because this is a thing that we all need to be behind. There are more than 70 groups, partners that have banded together for this, and it's not just journalism either.
Mhm.
We're talking government agencies and nonprofits and corporate America, because this is about all of us. And this is a celebration that everybody can buy into. It's nonpartisan. It's nothing to do with liberal or conservative. It's about all of us creating the best, most transparent government society that we can, for the benefit of everyone.
So now, what kinds of things you talked about? Um, uh, Things on the website and resources that both news media can use to help publicize Sunshine Week, individual groups, and then also people can come and see different events and do different things. What does that, and you have over 70 partners, which is pretty amazing. And Sunshine Week has always been sort of, I think, a groundswell effort. And so, with all of those activities and resources and people, what are you really hoping to do with Sunshine? What would you like to see? when you take a deep breath on Sunday the 17th, St. Patrick's Day, before you raise your green beer, what do you hope to have accomplished?
Well, that's the big question because we want impact. That's the whole point. And fortunately, that's what we're all about is measuring things, metrics and research. So we hope to try to move the needle on public knowledge and support for freedom of information in America. So there are a variety of ways we're going to be measuring that. Part of it is just social media traffic. So
Mhm.
we have the best researchers in social media tracking and what has happened in the past, now, and in the future to see where that's going. Of course, web traffic and that sort of thing, but more important, impact. So we hope to, survey Americans annually and track their knowledge and support for FOI. See
Mhm.
if we can move the needle. See how that's changing. We want to look at legislation that's proposed around the country. So we're working on a tracker, a legislative tracker, AI based, that can really look at, well, what kind of laws are being proposed around the country. Most of them towards secrecy, and we want to monitor that as well.
Mhm.
So we're interested in that. And there'll be other metrics too that we look at as far as actual compliance with public records laws by the government. Because ultimately, if the public affects the government, public opinion affects what government does. If the public supports strong, transparent government, then that should be reflected in how the government operates. At least we hope. So we're in the long game here.
Yeah.
We're not expecting, pivotal, monumental change in a year or this week. Um, so it's going to take time, but we got to get on it, and we got to do the best we can because if we don't, frankly, we're going to end up a nation of secret government and corruption and all the bad things that go with that, and we can't let that happen.
Absolutely. No, I think that's very well said. And I'm always surprised that, when you talk to just regular everyday people, it seems like they're surprised that they can have access to information. And when you talk when one once they realize, oh well, a government record is really anything that at least in Maryland, anything a government official or body creates. So that is a document, a voicemail, an email, a video. Any of those things are public records and should be accessible. Once people realize, oh, I have access to that, then they get really outraged when they can't have access. And so I always like to think of it as, the news media is just a stand in for the public. And I think it's surprising to many people to recognize that news media doesn't have any deeper rights or any fewer rights than members of the public. We're just sort of professional users. And so, in some of the research that you've done, I'd be interested to understand, what members of the public, what the everyday people are thinking about these issues. Have you been able to delve into that?
Oh, absolutely. We've done tons of research on that, and you're absolutely right. Most people are completely unaware of this, and um, they don't teach it in school.
Hmm.
No one's passing it along. There's not a ton of folks promoting it, so people are completely unaware of the power of information. It's at their fingertips if they just knew how to get it. I mean, backgrounding an online date, for example. A lot of people feel helpless or buying a house. And, if they only knew the power, I mean, studies show that because of when you have open government and open records, your drinking water is cleaner, your
Hmm.
restaurants are safer, sex offenders are less likely to reoffend. Um, Parents are able to make better choices of where to put their kids in school. All of that. So that's empirical research. It shows that. In fact, for every dollar spent on public records journalism, society benefits $287, according to one study. It saved lives. efficient government, lower taxes. It directly benefits every one of us. It's not just some philosophy, highfalutin,
Right.
concept. It's real. And so it's important that we help people learn how to do this because right now, what we have is we have the haves and the have nots. We have people who know how to use this, very few, highly educated, rich, old white males, according to my studies, uh, who know how to use this. And information is power. Uh,
Absolutely.
and so the folks being left out, they don't know how to do this and they're left behind. It's the knowledge gap. And we need to level the playing field. Everyone should have the ability to go and get this information if they just know about it. And of course, there are records that should be secret. I mean, we all acknowledge that. And the average person, the public, they're very concerned about certain information getting out, private information about
Right.
themselves. And of course, there are exemptions that protect their medical records and other things that would shouldn't be out on the internet, and national security and that sort of thing. So of
Right.
course, it's a balance. It may a common sense approach to balancing, you know, our ability to see what the government's doing and help ourselves versus invading privacy or something like that. Because people are concerned about that, and I think we all understand the importance of balance.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And
yeah,
when we get in, so in our jurisdictions, I lobby on behalf of the industry, and a lot of what we're doing is really, focusing on how can we expand that access, how can we expand the public's right to know. But it is always a balance. We don't want to have. In fact, in Maryland right now, there's a bill going through that would protect the personal addresses of judges, because in Maryland last winter, uh, a litigant actually murdered a judge, and because it was, and so there's no one wants those things to happen. There does need to be some guardrails, but generally, what I find is that public records laws are very, they're very sort of spirit of the law. They create this culture of openness. And so there's a lot of latitude. There's a lot of ways that judgment calls come in to say, okay, we could shield this under this exemption, under the 26 exemptions that Maryland has. And so it really is, I think, in some ways about creating that culture of openness. And Sunshine Week is a huge part of that. So
yeah.
is there a hashtag on Sunshine Week this year, or how can people sort of follow along on social media?
Absolutely. We're on all the socials. We're just adding YouTube, but we're on the X and the Facebook and the Insta and all that. Hashtag Sunshine Week FOI as well, I think. And you'll find it if you Google it and go to the website sunshineweek.org, and you can and follow us. We're going to have all sorts of things through the week on social media. We're going to have FOIA tips from the best requesters out there, the pros who do this every day. They provide little tips on how you can get records and maximize your efficiency at it. So that could be helpful for people. Video tips.
Oh, we'll
Uh,
share
Jason
that.
Leopold,
That sounds great.
Jason Leopold from Bloomberg, Nate Jones from the Washington Post, Martha Mendoza from the Associated Press, Gunita Singh from the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. So yeah, there's going to be a lot on the socials.
Terrific. Well, and we're doing our part here at MDDC. So we have pulled a lot of the investigative reporting work that's running in our contest right now. And we will be reposting that through our social media channels at MDDC Press, so that we can highlight the investigative work that our members are doing. So that hashtag will be Sunshine Week 2024. Because this is something that we'll do on an annual basis to really highlight what's happening across news media in our region. And I'm so
Oh, that's
excited to
great.
see it sounds wonderful what you all are doing. And I know we'll be collaborating in many ways. in sunshine weeks to come. So
Absolutely. I mean, people in Maryland should know about, and Delaware and every state should know about the great things being done by journalists, but also by citizens, everyday people who are using records very effectively to help them and their neighbors. In fact, research shows that probably less than 3 to 7% of FOIA requests, public records requests, are submitted by journalists, and it keeps declining. The majority are submitted by commercial interests, about 2/3. This greases our economic machine. It keeps the country running. And then the rest are submitted by average people and researchers and nonprofits and people trying to find out what's happening. So this truly is about all of us. It's not about just journalism or the media. The journalists are just a proxy for the public and a very important part of the information ecosystem. They get paid full time to gather important information and provide it for the public. But really, this is a right that every citizen should embrace, empower, and use. And when they do, they're going to find it's pretty darn cool.
it is. Well, and Sunshine Week is as well. So thank you for your leadership on this and amassing the team. Really appreciate you coming out to talk with us. And one day we'll have to have you back to talk more about the studies you're doing. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, SNYDER, @mddcpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.